Thanks for coming by today. My name is Scott Hunter, and I've got Kasey with me as well. I am the director of PM on the .NET team, so my team builds all of .NET, all the tooling for .NET, all the languages in .NET, and we build ASP.NET and Entity Framework as well. Kasey works on the tooling for .NET, and today I think we want to do two things. There's a session by somebody else on my team called Cesar de Torre. He is talking, I think, tomorrow. He has an entire talk on microservices. So Kasey and I today are going to focus on the basics, the building blocks below microservices. So basically, .NET Core is a big thing we're going to talk about, .NET Core 2.0, ASP.NET Core 2.0. We're going to talk about some of the new C# features that are coming out. We're going to show some of the publishing capabilities to publish to the cloud using CI/CD, and we're going to show some of the microservice building blocks. But this is kind of a building block talk. And then, as I said, the talk from Cesar tomorrow, he'll go in depth about, he'll actually write microservices on stage and get them into Azure and do all that stuff. So as we start, I'm going to do the first section, and we'll bring Kasey back up when the tooling comes on board. People always ask me, how's .NET doing? We open sourced .NET 2 years ago. Super happy about that. If you look at this graph shows the pull requests by the community. We're at a point now where about 50% of all pull requests on .NET come from the community, not Microsoft. We have Samsung, who is building their Tizen platform on .NET. So later this year, one of the jokes I tell people all the time is, if you want to go talk to your partner and ask for a new television, I need a new TV because I want to write .NET code on it. So I know I'm going to try that in January next year when these come out. I need to do brand new 4K with .NET. And we have other people like Illard Games. They are a gaming company. They are responsible for about half the performance improvements we have in ASP.NET Core. And then below here, you can see all of our foundation. We have a .NET Foundation with Red Hat, Samsung, Unity, Google. Not names you would normally expect to see, like Red Hat and Google and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that .NET is pervasive across all these different companies. Some of the Stack Overflow surveys that just came out. .NET Core, which shipped June of last year, you can see it's the third most popular framework. I think it's pretty awesome, being that we've only been alive. This framework's only been shipping for about 12 months. And then you can see that when it comes to most popular languages, C# is up there as well. So both .NET and C# are rising in these types of things. And this is one we're super proud of. Is if you watch Hacker News, if you're a Hacker News kind of person, you're going to see .NET show up in Hacker News all the time. I got some great quotes from some customers here. Raygun, they went from Node.js to ASP.NET Core. They went from 1,000 requests a second to 20,000. You see Alaska, Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow, that's one of our premier sites. They've been running on .NET since the beginning of Stack Overflow. If you want to do microservices and containers, this is a new part of our website that we just put up recently. This is the architecture page. I'll bring it up on my laptop and switch to it here just so you can see it. I recommend everybody to come and check this out. This is my PC, and I'm on the .NET website, and there's this button here for architecture. So one of the things that we used to have at Microsoft was this group called Patterns and Practices that built all these great books on building applications, web applications, secure applications, stuff like that. We're now doing that internally as a team. And so if you are interested in the cloud and microservices, these are all ebooks. You can both download them. You can view them in the web. There is a sample app available for each of these as well. You can go to GitHub, and you can just clone down the entire sample. And this will show you a full app with microservices, all the best practices and patterns, all in there. And we have a couple of these. We have one for microservices and containers. We have one for modernizing existing applications. You can see cloud, web, mobile applications. And so I highly recommend going to my website, going to this page, grabbing these ebooks. They will help you, especially this microservice space. And we're actually taking stuff from the microservice stuff, that book, and we're putting it into the actual framework. So you're going to see later in some of my slides where we have code practices in there that we've actually will turn into framework features later this year and early next year. As I said, it's available here. Already went through this. Next big thing in the .NET space is, we have lots of .NETs, and I've been preaching this for about 2 years. I introduced this at Build 2 years ago, .NET Standard. And what we're kind of saying is that we have one set of APIs that are common and consistent across all the .NET platforms, whether it's a desktop, whether it's .NET Core on a microservice, Windows UWP, iOS and Android with Xamarin, or games with Unity. There's one set of APIs that are consistent across all of this. We just shipped this a few weeks ago, or .NET Standard 2.0. Now, what's interesting about that is Windows UWP, they are getting that with RS3, which ships in October, I think. It's in preview right now. If you're on a preview build of the next version of Windows, you get that support. So this standard is going across the world. People ask me all the time, hey, where can I download .NET Standard? .NET Standard is a standard like HTML5 is. Your browser implements HTML5 so you can view the web. .NETs have to implement .NET Standard to be compliant. With .NET Core 2, we shipped .NET Standard 2.0. A lot of customers told us when they were trying to take their applications and move them to .NET Core that a bunch of APIs were missing. And so we took the intersection of all the APIs in .NET Framework and all the APIs in Xamarin, and that's what kind of made up what .NET Standard 2.0 is. We added 20,000 APIs back if you're a .NET Core customer. And 70% of all the NuGet packages in NuGet.org work on .NET Standard platforms, which means they work on Core, they work on UWP, they work everywhere. And this is really where you're going to see .NET grow API-wise. We'll actually grow the standard as we move forward. This just shows a bunch of the APIs coming back. The big ones that I think most folks, if you're a .NET Core developer, all the data stuff, all the XML stuff, all the serialization stuff, that's the big one. And there's one that's color is so good, you can't see, that's I/O. At least I'm colorblind, so I can't see it. Anyways, let's just jump in and do a quick demo of .NET Standard 2.0. So what I'll do here is just going to build a brand new class library. And you're going to notice here that there's a new option in Visual Studio 2017 called .NET Standard. And this lets you build .NET Standard libraries. And so this is really the mode you want to use if you want to go build a library that you want to share across all your apps. So I'll say Standard Class Library. And we'll make that. These class libraries are special in a variety of different ways. And I'll show that. So first off, if you go to Properties on one of these .NET Standard class libraries, you're going to notice a new tab shows up in here called Package. Here it is. And notice there's a checkbox here, generate a NuGet package on build. So we know that as you want to start building .NET Standard class libraries to share across all your .NETs, you might want to share those via NuGets. And so we're making it as simple as possible to build a NuGet library. You just check that box. Every time you do a build, you get a NuGet package out from that build. And so that only happens on .NET Standard class libraries. So it's very easy to build a NuGet package, which you can then share with the developers in your team. Or if you're an open source developer, you could actually go and upload that at NuGet.org. The next thing is, if I go up and look here, I can drop this down, and you can see the variety of .NET standards that are supported by this. So I can decide to target 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, all these different .NET standards. .NET Standard 2 is the one that has all the APIs. But if you're building a library and you want to share it, you should probably try to use the lowest one of these you can, because it means that you'll have the most portability across all the .NETs. So we'll leave that set to 2.0. And I just want to quickly just show, one of the cool things here is one of the things about .NET Standard is it does not require you to recompile any of your code. You can take any .NET code that you have all the way back to the beginning of .NET, and if the APIs in that code match the .NET Standard, it'll just work in the code. And so that was one of our design goals, was being able to make these .NET Standard libraries but not requiring anybody to recompile anything. Because even in Microsoft, we have code that we don't have the source for anymore. I'm sure you do too. Everybody does. Everybody's worked on that project. They're like, where's the code for that DLL? I don't have it. So let's just do a quick thing. I was playing with on the web, and I was saying, hey, there's these. I went and found a sample of extracting a zip file. Now we actually have zipping built into .NET now, but back in the day we did not. And I want to show you some of the .NET standard stuff here. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and I'll do manage NuGet, and I'll bring that library in. Notice that my app already has a package, .NET Standard Library. That's how .NET Standard is actually implemented. It's a package that you actually have in your project, and it brings you all those APIs. So I'll go to sharp zip. There it is. The only thing interesting about this to me is this is old code. So 2011, built way before .NET Core existed, way before .NET Standard existed. But I can bring this in, and it'll just work. So let's go back up here. We'll install this. Get the dialog. But I want to point out something about this. As I install it, that thing was compiled against a version of .NET Framework that I'm not using. And so Visual Studio is going to kind of warn you and go, if you look at my NuGet folder here, like, hey, what's up with those things there? If I go look at my error list, what it's going to tell me is, hey, this thing was restored using .NET Framework 4.6.1 instead of .NET Standard 2, because this library was built before there was any .NET Standard. Now, if I want to check that if code is .NET Standard compliant, simple. There's an extension. I have it installed, and all the links to this are going to be in the deck, which will be available. We have this tool called the .NET Portability Analyzer. You can run it on your code, and it will tell you if you're .NET Standard compliant. So I'll right-click here, and I will have an Analyze Project Portability. There it goes. It's running. I can open the report. And so with just a right-click inside of Visual Studio, I can easily check to see whether I'm compliant. And there you go. Look at that. So that NuGet package works on .NET Core, it works on .NET Framework, and it works on .NET Standard 2.0. So it's good everywhere. And so because of that, if I wanted to, there's that warning down there. I can right-click on the package, bring up properties, and I can basically tell Visual Studio, hey, I know this is good. So I can say, don't warn for that, do a rebuild, and all the errors and all the warnings go away, and I'm good to go. So that's showing how you can take some old code, import it into a library, and it just works. So that's kind of some of the .NET Standard 2 stuff. Yes, there's a question here?
Is there any plan to add that analyzer into here so it does it automatically?
Yeah, so the question was, is there a plan to add the analyzer into the product? Yes, I would love to have the analyzer in the product. In fact, I want the analyzer to be even better than it is today. I want to be as you type code. Emo on my team has some cool analyzers that he's written for Visual Studio, which as you're typing code, it will actually tell you when you use an API if that API is compatible or not, and kind of give you a warning as you're actually coding. I would love to get that in the product in the future. But all this kind of stuff I'm showing you, I'd like to have it be able to run the analyzer and turn the warning off automatically for you. You know, that's our goal is productivity, so yes. Okay. So I'm going to switch back to the slides here for a second. And I want to talk about, okay, that works. .NET Core 2.0. This is shipped a few weeks ago, and the big feature in .NET Core 2.0, we only shipped .NET Core 1.0 June of last year. Why do you ship a major version that fast? And it really was the APIs. We thought that adding 20,000 APIs back to the product was something worthy of revving a version number. And so .NET Core 2 basically implements .NET Standard 2, so you have all these APIs. We have more Linux distros that we support. Another big thing in the 2.0 wave, we used to actually reference and ship the package, the framework via packages. Now you just reference it as a single entity, and I'll show you that in a second, what that looks like. Our tooling for .NET Core projects has gotten a lot better. Kasey's going to come up in a little bit and show you live unit testing and some of the other features that we now have working in Core. And everything we do in .NET Core and ASP.NET Core works in Visual Studio for Mac as well. This is that example. This is what a 1.0 project looked like. Yeah, and you can see that I've got all this stuff here. I don't want to hand type this stuff. I don't want you to have to go figure out and Google where to hand type this stuff. A 2.0 project looks like this. Reference the SDK, version 2, and use ASP.NET. Very simple, very clean. That was this moving away from packages to make this simpler. I was going to quickly show the CLI. One of the core benefits of .NET Core all up, the reason we did .NET Core, .NET Framework ships as part of Windows. So when you grab a version of Windows, it's going to have the latest version of .NET Framework inside of it. And we only have one framework in Windows, and that's because Windows wants to keep the size of Windows down to a reasonable size, and having 5 or 6 .NET frameworks would be a challenge. And so customers always tell me the biggest issue they have is I want to go build an app, but my IT department only lets me have .NET Framework 4.6.1 on the machine. We've not certified for 4.6.2 or 4.7 or 4.7.1. And so when we built .NET Core, a big goal of it was complete side by side. And so if I look at my machine, and we keep .NET Core in the program files folder, let me switch back to my box. Here is the program files .NET folder. And inside of that, there's a shared folder, and that's where the SDKs or the frameworks on the machine are. And you'll notice that I've got 1.0.5, 1.1.2, and 2.0 all in the box. And so these are completely side by side by side. You can have as many or as few of these as I want. I can just delete one of these things. There is no uninstall or technology required here. These are just files on disk. Nuke the folder, a version's gone. Put the folder back, a version's back. You can hand copy the folder to the disk if you want. And that's a core tenet of the stack. Also, another core tenet was, these things don't need to be huge. So if I look at this, 61 megs is .NET Core 2.0, which does not feel like a bad size. You can have a couple of those on the machine and not feel like you have any challenges. Here is the 1.1.2. You'll see the .NET Core 2 is actually a little smaller. We removed some duplicate files and stuff. At the same time, if I go up here and look at SDK, there are multiple SDKs. There's the 1.1 SDK, that's the SDK that supports the 1.0 and 1.1 projects, and the 2.0 SDK. One of the cool features that we did as well is I can go to my command prompt, and if I say .NET -- version, it's going to show that I'm on the 2.0 SDK. So let's go to my source folder, and I'll create a console app. And I want to show a cool feature that we did. And what that is let me jump into that folder, source console. I've got this global JSON file. This is a file you can put on your machines. And I'm going to copy this file into the console folder. And let's go back to that and take a look at what this looks like. So what that is it's a simple file that contains the version of the SDK that you want to work in the folders below where you drop this file. If I change this to be 1.1 and save it, go back to the prompt, and do .NET version again, I'm 1.1. So now I'm using the 1.1 SDK. So we make it very easy to have multiple side-by-side frameworks. We also make it very easy to switch between the SDKs. There's no registry magic. There's no, this stuff is all just easy text files that you can use to do stuff. So let's switch back to 2.0 SDK. There we go. And save that. Let's just verify that we're good. Yeah, 2.0. I'm going to type .NET new. One of the features that we did in 2.0 is we added all the project templates that we have in Visual Studio to the CLI. So you can see there's my console library, my class library, all the ASP.NET projects. Some folks in the room might be excited that we've actually added support for Visual Basic. This is the first version of .NET Core that adds VB support back. And so you've got console and class libraries and stuff like that that work in VB, but you can see across here there's a wide matrix of these things. We'll just do .NET new console. Something else we did, if you played with our 1.0 bits, if you were doing command line, you had to do .NET restore, .NET build, .NET run. I can just do .NET run now. And imagine this, we made the SDK smart enough to actually do all those other steps for you. Fail, you die. If this makes it happy, I will be upset. It's going to make it happy. No, it did not. I don't know why it's unhappy. Anyways, that was the end of the demo. Anyways, I was going to run the .NET Run, which is not running. That's kind of scary, actually. Sometimes you wonder about the state of your machine. But anyways, that's the CLI, and the point of the CLI is we've added all those features back. The other thing we added to the CLI is I can now create solution files from the CLI. I can add project references from the CLI. All that stuff just works, and so that's .NET CLI 2.0. ASP.NET Core. We shipped ASP.NET Core 1 obviously last year in June as well, and there's this benchmark called Tech Empower, and we were in the top 10 on the plain text benchmark of Tech Empower. ASP.NET Core 2 is about 20% faster than ASP.NET Core 1.0 was, so it's faster. We're working on some of the other Tech Empower benchmarks. We're better in the JSON one this time around as well, and we'll continue to push there. Another big thing is we added a new web tech called Razor Pages. It's for people who just want to get work done. The MVC pattern that we've had for the last couple of versions is great, but sometimes it's confusing to have a view folder or controller folder and how they all mingle together. I'm going to do a quick demo of Razor Pages. It's just meant for quickly building stuff. Razor now supports the latest C# 7.1. This is a super important one. If you publish your ASP.NET Core projects to the cloud, they're much smaller than they were before. It used to be that every time you published an ASP.NET Core project, you published ASP.NET with it. And so they were roughly 16 megs for like a Hello World web application. You can now see it's 2.6 megs, and that's because now all we're doing is publishing your application. So those publish sizes get smaller. This is also important in the container space because it allows our containers to be smaller. I'm going to do a demo of this. This is my favorite feature is as we're starting to build microservice apps, container apps, how do you diagnose these apps in the cloud? It's very hard. And what we've done here is, it used to be that the way you would do this is you would add NuGet packages to your project. You would go set config flags, config switches flags. And of course, nobody in the room knew what those NuGet packages were or those config switches were, so you never did it, and you did not get a great experience. It's all built in now. We have great authentication support in our templates. It now supports the auth apps on your phones. Those are more secure than text messages. So that's built in. And a lot of our web developers are building Angular and React-based applications. And so we now have templates for building Angular and React apps where we give you the .NET Core backend and all the Angular and React stuff on the front end. So let's do a demo of ASP.NET Core. So go to Visual Studio, and let's do File New Project. Go to Web. I'll select Core. Okay, we'll do a web application. This is new. Notice here's the Angular templates. Here's the React templates. I'll do a Razor Page app. Hello. So this is the new Razor Page tech that we have. And so there's this new Pages folder here. And you just put pages in here. So I'm going to let's put a test page in here. And I'll show you a bug as I do this and how to work around the bug. So let's create a Razor Page here. Demo. The bug that you might run into is if you open one of these, create a new one, sometimes IntelliSense doesn't work the first time. If it doesn't work, just close the file and reopen the file. And I will do that just to be safe after the circle of patience leaves my screen. All those errors I just told you would happen. So just close that, reopen that. That's a bug, fixed in the next update of Visual Studio. So there we go. So what I'm going to do now is I want to build a simple web page. So what I'm going to do is I need a type first. So let me go here and add a folder. Supposed to put your models in your own folder. So let's create this models. And inside of models, I'm going to create a customer object. And we'll just call that customer. And I've already built one of these things, so I will just do this. Cheat a little bit. All it is a first name and a last name. I've got a required attribute from data annotations. Need to bring the namespace in for that. There we go. So I've got my customer object. And now what I want to do is I want to go put a form on my page and show you how easy this is to do. I got a form actually pre-written. There you go. And I just want to show what this looks like. This is very simple code. I've got a message right up here where I'm going to say whether this was succeeded or failed. I've got a validation summary. This is a new feature called tag helpers that we built in ASP.NET Core. And I can take any HTML element, and now I do an ASP dash, it turns it into a tag helper. And this allows you to write ASP.NET code that looks just like HTML. So it's easy for designers and people to deal with, but you can light up the ASP.NET features just by adding an ASP4 attribute or ASP- attribute. So here I've said this div is where I want my error messages if I have an error on the page. And then I've got a regular HTML label, but I tell it I want to use customer.firstname for that label. And then I have a regular HTML input tag, but I once again put the ASP.NET thing there as well because I want to data bind this. And I am getting some errors here, but that's to be expected. Let's go open up this new file that we have in CSHTML. This is the file that's behind the scenes. And it's complaining because I don't have anything on my model. I need to add a few things here. So let's go add the message property. We'll do a string here, call that message. And I need to add that model. I need a customer. This should make all my errors go away in my CSHTML file. As soon as this builds through, there you go. So now that everything compiles there, that's good. So it's simple. I build a regular HTML form. I put my model directly into the class. I need to do a few more things. I want that message to actually persist every time the page refreshes. And so I'm going to put a simple attribute on there and say, I want that to go in temp data. And I want to bind this customer object to that web form. So to do that, I put it over here and I say, let's go do bind. I want to bind the property. So I've set that. And then all I've got to do to finish this app and show how simple it was to build this form is I will write a public, actually I'll do action results. And this will be on post. And so the cool thing there is that's pretty much the entire app. Simple to build forms using ASP.NET. Can do all the regular model state. This is the validation. And I would probably say, hey, if it's not valid, then I would want to return back to the page. But anyways, that's how easy it is to build a form in ASP.NET Core, and we will move on. Next thing is, this is something that I introduced just last week, and this is the Windows Compat Pack for .NET Core. So even with .NET Standard 2, there's probably some libraries that you might have code that you would want to use. And so what I've done is I've actually We've taken some of the common things that people have asked for, things like system.drawing, system.codedom, Microsoft Win32 registry, and I have configuration here as well. Some of these are Windows only. That's why they're not in .NET Standard. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a NuGet package that you can actually add to a core project that adds even more compatibility. So our goal is to make it very easy for all of you customers to actually move your apps to .NET Core, and that's going to come soon. And now I'm going to hand off to Kasey, and she's going to show you some of the new tooling that we have.
Cool. Hello.
Clicker, clicker.
Yes. All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kasey Uhlenhout. I'm a program manager on the .NET and Visual Studio team at Microsoft. So how many of you are on Visual Studio 2017 today? Oh, heck yeah. Like maybe 50%. That's pretty good. Awesome. So in Visual Studio 2017, it shipped in March. And the reason for my team personally that it was a big release was because it was our first major VS release that was after we shipped Roslyn. So Roslyn is the code name for the project where we basically re-architected the entire C# and Visual Basic compiler from native code into managed code. And this let us write new language features faster, as well as new IDE features faster. And then because it's open source, we provided basically a new set of APIs on top of the compiler, so anyone can write their own code-focused tool or technology. So that analyzer Scott was talking about earlier that Emo's going to build for telling you if your .NET Core libraries are portable is going to be using Roslyn analyzers, which anyone could write today, which wouldn't be possible before that. But that's why 2017 is big for us. In Visual Studio 2017, we focused primarily on performance and productivity, because that's what everyone cares about. So yay! So we've done a ton of new things. So when you all installed Visual Studio 2017, you probably noticed it's a new install experience. You can now pick and choose what you want to install. Also, hopefully that made your install size smaller. And also, I mean, it takes me like 20 minutes to install Visual Studio now, which it used to take me like 3 hours, so win. We also have worked a ton on improving navigation. A lot of people said they're wasting time in code reviews because people are nitpicking code style and other minutiae, so we have code style enforcement now. And we've added a ton of new features to make you more productive, which I'll show you rather than just talk about. And also, Visual Studio 2017, which shipped in March, shipped with C# 7.0. Now, in August, Visual Studio 2017 version 15.3, don't ask about the naming, came out. And that shipped with C# 7.1. So just a couple months later, we're already now able to do point releases for language features because of Roslyn. We're able to move so quickly that now we can put nice little syntactic sugar features into point releases. And again, we have a ton of new stuff that I'll show you there. So rather than talk about it, let's just go. Can you put me on 2? All right. Can you all read the font size from where you're sitting? Awesome. So here I have a simple .NET Core app. It's just a library that I'm going to use for tweeting my bike workouts later. And so the first thing I want to show is our new lightweight projects for .NET Core projects. So for example, I can just take a file and just drag and drop it. And then if you're looking in the Solution Explorer, you'll see it just pop up right there. And so that file authentication.cs now just popped up in my Solution Explorer. So now we have file globbing support, where now your Solution Explorer and File Explorer will always be in sync. The other thing that we've added to make projects more lightweight is I can now just right-click and directly edit my CSproj file. So I don't have to unload my project, then work on my CSproj file, and then reload it later. You can now just edit it directly. And as Scott was showing earlier, it's now,
Yeah, finally.
I guess I'm a better demo dolly, you know. But I can see how much smaller it is. And also, I didn't have to unload anything. And I can just close out, and I'm good. And so
being able to open CSproj files without using the XML editor or some crazy thing, and be able to save and modify them, that's amazing. So,
yeah. And if you'll look closely, you'll notice that the best part of this is I added that file, and there's no indication of that file that I added in my CSproj file, which means we're going to have a ton fewer merge conflicts in our CSproj files from adding and removing files. So that's another win in that department. Unfortunately, the two features I showed, file globbing and this new CSproj, are only for .NET Core projects right now. You'll have to talk to Scott if it's going to other project types in the future. But right now, it's .NET Core only.
The hope is to move this project system to all the other project types as well, so you get all the same benefits, the globbing and CS project editing and stuff.
And there you have it. All right, so in this app, like probably the first thing you're gonna notice is, so how many of you all do all your like merging and things on the command line with like Git or whatever you're using? Oh, actually not that many. Ooh, interesting. Well, if you do, you probably run into this a lot where you have your merge conflicts inside your files, and you're like, oh, I have to resolve this. And so one thing that we're adding in Visual Studio constantly is all of these quick actions and refactorings to help make you more productive. So for example here, this one's telling me, oh, I can take the change in head, I can take the change in the upstream, or I can take both changes. And it's just a one-click fix. So I just want to take this one. And in one click, I'm able to do this. And that's with Control Dot. We also made it so Alt-Enter does the same thing now as well. If you're coming from other backgrounds, and Alt-Enter is easier. So those of you who are in 2017, if you're on Enterprise only, we have this thing called live unit testing. And so before I explain what live unit testing is, I need to take a step back and explain how most of us do unit testing today. So usually, we're trying to figure out what is like the smallest number of tests I can run so that I'm not wasting my time at my computer waiting for them to run, but also like a big enough set that you can be like fairly confident that you didn't break anything else. And so we always have this tension between confidence and time with unit tests. And so once we finally figure out what that set is, then we have to manually click a button somewhere to run all those tests, and then we have to navigate to a test window somewhere to see the actual results of that test. And so we lose kind of our context of development while we're doing that. And so it's like a whole lot of steps just to test things. So what live unit testing is trying to do is get rid of all of that manual rigmarole that you have to do and do it for you automatically. So what it's doing is it's basically figuring out, based on a code change, what tests are impacted by that code change, running just those tests for you, and then updating these icons in line to let you know the status of your code. So a red X means that this line of code is hit by at least one failing test. A green check means this line of code is covered by all passing tests. And then a blue dash means this line is not covered by any tests at all. And so you might want to add a test there. You can click on the icon to see exactly which tests are hitting it, and double click to navigate to the test. When you go into your test file, you'll notice there's these beaker icons, and that's so you can determine if this test is in what we call a live test set. So your live test set is the set of all tests that are running live. So it turns out when we built this feature, people were like, oh, I have like thousands of tests, and I'm only working in one unit test project, so I don't need to run all 1,000 tests continuously. And so we actually let you choose which tests you want to run live and not. And so, for example, if this test right here I knew was a super long-running test and I didn't want to run live, I can now right-click, go to live unit testing, and I can choose to include or exclude the specific test. So if I exclude it, then when I look, you'll notice it's like an empty beaker now, meaning it's not in your live test set. And you can quickly just add it back as well to include it. It's the same with actually going to the Solution Explorer. You can just right-click, do the same thing for an entire project. So you can choose to include a unit test project, exclude one, or exclude all unit test projects except for that one, if you want. So don't really know why this test is failing, so it's going to go ahead and debug it. I'm only going to show one debugging feature in this talk because I don't have that much time, but there's a whole like supercharge your debugging session with Kasey Anderson and Nikhil, I think tomorrow, maybe? I think it's tomorrow or the next day, so I would highly recommend going to that if you want to learn all the new debugging features that we've added in Visual Studio 2017. Once this finishes, which, sorry, I have a Franken build, so debugging kind of got the chop in this. You can do it. But what you're eventually going to see is it's going to throw an exception. Maybe. Oh, here it is. It was there all along. OK. Oh, no. No. Oh, there it is. OK. So if you look here, you'll notice this is the new exception helper that we've added in Visual Studio 2017, where we try to put the most important information at the top level. So for example here, I threw a null reference exception, so obviously it would be nice if it told me what was null rather than me having to restart a debugging session and step to figure out what is null. Yeah. And so now we're going to tell you at the top level what is actually null. And you'll notice, we go a step further, we have an actual dotted chain of expressions here where it's today's workout could have been null or notes. And this is letting me know specifically that it's the notes expression that is returning null. So it saves you time there as well. So let's go fix it. So one thing that we've added, because I have a Franken build, I kind of get ahead of myself sometimes, and I'm showing you features that aren't in 15.3. They're actually like in 15.4 or 15.5, so apologies. But one thing that we've added in 15.4, it might be 15.5, whatever, coming soon. You might recognize from productivity power tools is the ability to control and then click to go to definition. So if you hold control, it will make basically anything a hyperlink. And then you can quickly navigate to its definition. So if I want to go to where notes is actually defined, I can now just quickly navigate to it with the control, which is helpful when you have like your hand on your mouse and you're like looking around things. Just click control, click, instead of having to right click. So in here, I'm just going to go and quickly add a null check. And so to do this, I must again do control dot, which is your one-stop shop for any quick action you want to do. If I come over here, we now allow you to add a null check. And so this is in 15.3, actually showed you a 15.3 thing, where you can now add a null check from any parameter. And so I just add that in, and it adds it for me. Yeah. So as I did that, you might have noticed that the live unit testing icons kind of faded a little bit and had a clock icon letting you know it's like, oh, these tests I need to rerun because you made a code change. And then it updated inline and let me know that now all my tests are passing from this. And so live unit testing is great for that. You just keep coding, and then it's going to let you know when everything's passing again. So one feature that we have that's my absolute favorite feature, but turns out not a lot of people knew about it, is it used to be called Navigate To. We renamed it in an effort to make it more findable to go to all, which you can access with Control-T. If you used it before, it's Control Comma, it's the same feature. And this lets you quickly navigate to any file, type, member, or symbol declaration from a single spot. So basically, I want to go back to that tweet method that I had earlier. So I can just type tweet, and it's going to give me my whole list of things here. But if I know that specifically, I'm looking for the member, I can filter it by putting M in there and then filtering it down. And so just quickly navigate there. So something you might be noticing is, why is the name of this method underlined in green? So again, if we hover over and press Control dot, it's telling me I have a naming violation. So it's saying, oh, this needs to actually be a Pascal case. And this is part of our code style configuration and enforcement that we've added to Visual Studio 2017, where you can now basically enforce across your team your code style. So the way that you can do this locally on your machine is to go to Tools, Options, come into Text Editor, C#, Code Style. And in here, you'll see there's a ton of things like var explicit type, this dot, or me dot, use built-in types, use framework types, etc. And so we have a ton of different options in here. Also within here, again, is naming. And so you can write your own naming rules. So this seems great, except it's in Tools Options. So how do I enforce it across my entire team? Or what happens if, as in the case here, I have var, where I prefer the explicit type. We investigate in this. But in a unit test project, I could care less if you're using var or the explicit type, as long as you're writing a unit test. And so I actually want different code styles in different projects. And so the way that we did that is we worked with the editor config community and extended their file format to now work with .NET rules. So editor config is an open source file format. Basically, it works in all editors, and today it supports like tabs versus spaces, like the size of your indent, things like that. And so we've worked with them. We actually extended it to work for .NET. So if I actually go to an editor config file, You can see here like kind of classic rules like indent size, indent style. And then if I scroll down, you'll now see we have .NET rules like avoid this dot, or I want to use var. So you can see here var. And so what we do now is it's just a text file, so it just travels with all your source code. And then whatever directory it's in, it will apply to all files within that directory, including like subdirectories. So you can see here, I have my editor config. If I, oops.
Yeah, and you can use this to basically, I can say I can disallow var in my code. If I
Yep. So if I go to the File Explorer, you're going to see my editor config is here at the top level. And so all of these subfolders have these rules applied to it. But now if I actually want my unit test to not prefer var, so I can just copy this. I can right-click, and so I'm using Mads K. He wrote an extension for editor config to give you kind of syntax highlighting and other language services. So I can just right-click, add an editor config file. And then I can just choose to basically override those settings. And so I can say, psych. Don't care if you use var, so sure, use var. And then again, you can choose how you want to configure it. So you can make it none, meaning we're not going to show anything in the editor if you do it. We can make it a suggestion, which if you saw all those little gray dots, those are code suggestions which we've added in Visual Studio 2017, where we can indicate things that won't actually break builds and aren't actually like warnings, but you kind of want to surface them to a developer, like hints to them. So kind of just like little hints, and then warnings and errors. So I actually, again, said I don't care if you use var, so I'm just going to make it none. The one kind of snafu we have here is any files you had open when you edited an editor config, you have to like close and reopen in order for all the editor config rules to actually apply to it. But you know, that's why we have this Control-T thing. So I can just open this back up. And you'll see in here now, none of my vars have any dots underneath them. Whereas if I go to my athlete file, you'll see the vars there do though. So you can see the gray dots there, but not in my other one. So that's how you can make it different across different projects within the same solution. And also, it's a text file, so it like literally travels with all your source anywhere. So just check it into your source control and it travels with you. Yeah, question?
Quick question on the live unit testing. Can you make it exclude or include by test category?
OK, so the question was, for live unit testing, can you include or exclude by test category? We actually don't do anything special for test categories yet, but you are not the first person to ask, so I will forward that on to those guys. Yep. Cool. What's next? Wait, sorry, say that one more time. How do we get editor config into a what? So the question is, if you do file new project, how do you get an editor config to, I'm guessing, like automatically appear with that?
Yeah, the official company.
Oh, so he wants to know, so is there an official company-wide editor config for how we think you should do code style?
Well, I think he's saying his company.
For your
can
company.
They make their own?
Oh, I see.
And say when they say file new project, all their new projects start with the
Yes.
company default editor config.
Yeah. So you're not the first person to ask that. The answer is no, not yet. But so we're gonna, at some point, it's on our radar to like make templated editor configs, so you can just have like a default one and attach it to new projects. Yeah, but we don't unfortunately have it yet. Yes.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was, does the editor config travel? And so will it like actually travel with your source control and around? And yeah, so if I like clone this repo, this editor config, like I'm gonna show you it's in my project. Oh, I have to refresh maybe. Oh, here we go. So you can see the editor config is in here. It's just a file. And so this is in my entire solution folder. And then again, the test one that I added is now in here as well. And so if I check that in source control and anyone pulls it down and they open it up in Visual Studio, those editor config rules are going to apply there. So like open source, like library owners love this thing because like, everyone sends me pull requests with the wrong style and it makes my code base so hard to read. And so now you can just have an editor config in there and anyone that pulls it down and opens it up in Visual Studio will have that enforced. The other thing that I want to add there is that currently, if you set something as an error, it will not actually break your build. We'll break it like in Visual Studio, but not on the command line. And that's like literally what people are working on right now on my team, is making it so that editor config will actually work with, like the compiler will recognize editor config. So if you set all your code style as an error, people will not be able to build. So if you can integrate with like your CI/CD system. Yeah, question?
So around that, like if you already fail on mornings and stuff, it still won't pick up editor config stuff. Like editor config is not used in the build process.
Oh, so the question is editor config used today in the build process? No. So today, if in my editor config I put something as a warning or an error, it will not show in the command line right now. It will, fingers crossed, soon. Yeah.
15.4, 15.5.
I can't say that. Why? I don't know the answer. I also made something break, but I don't know why.
Okay,
Anyways, okay, I'm sorry.
let's do
I'm
questions at the end, and let's move forward.
Okay.
So we have a lot of stuff to go through still.
We're going to hold questions to the end because we have a lot of material we want to get through.
All right. Okay, so anyways, that was a nice detour off of naming, so now I can just make my naming rules work. And as I'm scrolling down here, you're going to notice there's this huge faded chunk of code. And if I investigate that with control dot again, it's going to tell me this is actually unreachable code. So something that we've added in 15.5, coming soon, is we actually have unreachable code detection now. So we'll now be like, oh, that's unreachable. You should probably just get rid of it. And in a single click, we'll axe it for you. Yep. Let's see. Last thing. So let's say I'm an athlete or whatever in here. What is this wrong? Oh, sorry, I'm just using new language features, cheating. I can't do that for the next demo. Okay. So I'm an athlete, and I want to actually add a parameter in here. So I actually, because I'm tweeting my workouts, I need to know what people's Twitter handle is. So I'm just going to add that parameter in here. I can just, you'll notice IntelliSense. Let me scroll back. IntelliSense is completely different in Visual Studio 2017. So you can see that we have all these icons across the bottom that let you filter by different things. So there's like, you hover over, you can see what the filter icon is and what the keyboard shortcut is with it. And then as you're typing, like it'll bold. So you can see like the T is now bolded, letting you know why we're actually suggesting things to you. So again, and camel case matching has always worked in here. So you can do that. So I know I want to do a Twitter handle. And then the new thing we've added in 15.3 is we actually do smart variable naming. We're actually going to suggest variable names for you based off your type. So, oh, I added a parameter called Twitter handle. I probably want to name it Twitter handle, Twitter, or handle. And that is what I want to name it. And in 15.3, 15.4, not totally sure, but now because we're an open source project and we love open source, we actually worked with we used the humanizer package now in probably 15.5, you'll notice, and so now we pluralize these as well. So if I have a list, I can get my list of Twitter handles in there as well. So I can add these in. But actually, before I add this in, I kind of want to know like how screwed am I when I add a new parameter, because how many places do I need to change it? So to do that, I can do final references. And when I do final references, you'll notice, heck yes, we finally colorized that thing. So now it actually looks like code. So about time. The other thing that we've done is, yeah, you can clap if you want. We also, rather than just a plain text list, we now let you actually group your results. So if you actually wanted to see what project they're in and different things, or if you hate the grouping, you can just make a no group. But I can see there's 4 places now that I would have to update this, which is a pain in the butt. But again, I come here, do new Twitter handle. What is my Twitter handle? Okay. And so when I do this, I'm now getting an error because this actually doesn't exist. And again, we've added a refactoring to let you add a parameter from the call site. So we're doing a ton of new refactorings and quick fixes all the time to help make you more productive, which is something we're trying to do. And again, I can just control click to go back here. And yeah, so I can just come in here, create an initialized property, control dot again, add my null check, and I literally had so much code written for me with no work. So pretty awesome. Yep.
C#.
C#. Can you go back slides? Oh, you don't have the new slides. Oh, nope. Nope.
That was what I saw when I had.
I wonder if I didn't save it. Oh, well, we'll just skip slides. We'll just go into demo. Who cares?
So we're going to show C# 7.
Yeah, so
and
again, as I said before, C# 7.0 came out in March with Visual Studio 2017 RTM. So when that came out, C# 7. And version 15.3, 7.1 came out. And now whatever, we're basically trying to wrap up 7.2. We'll possibly have a 7.3. And so again, because of Roslyn, we're able to even consider point releases of a language right now, which is pretty awesome. And then C# 8 is something that we're also thinking about right now for like in the future. Like what's the next major language version going to be? And I actually have a prototype of what we're working on right now, so hopefully we'll get to that soon. Okay, so the coolest thing in C# 7 is tuples. So you can see here that I have the old school tuple where it's a reference, and I'm basically just trying to return two things from this method. So I'm trying to return a workout that's my workout and the number of calories associated with that workout. And so I have two different things here. I'm just going to kill unit testing because I messed it up. I'm sorry, I didn't write enough unit tests. Okay. And so what we can do is we actually now in C# 7.0 built tuples into the language. So I can now just do this, and now they're values, and then get rid of this. And this is what a tuple looks like. You're going to see an error because actually my project is targeting C# 6 rather than C# 7. And so if we notice that you're using a language feature that your project actually isn't supporting, we're going to like squiggle it for you and basically offer to upgrade your project for you. So I'm going to upgrade all my projects to C# 7, and so we'll do that. And so by default, we have you set to the latest major version is what all your projects by default in Visual Studio will be. If you want to go into a minor version, you have to opt in. So if you start using a like C# 7.1 feature, you'll get that squiggle, and you'll have to do control dot to upgrade your project. So here's a tuple. I can optionally name my tuple elements. So I can say, oh, the name of my workout is workout. I'm going to return the calories. And again, so down here was where I actually consumed my tuple. So traditionally, tuples, the elements are just called item 1 and item 2. But now because I actually named my tuple elements, you can see I have a code suggestion that's telling me I should use the explicitly provided tuple name instead. And so we have a ton of these code suggestions built into Visual Studio to kind of help you learn how the new features work and what you can do with them. And so as you notice, as I did that, actually my tuple here got a suggestion under it. If I investigate this, it's saying, oh, hey, look at that. You are just using a tuple's elements, and you're never actually passing the entire tuple to anything else. So why don't we just deconstruct this for you into local variables instead? And so I can just do that. And you'll see now, instead of this having to be best.calories, it's now just calories. And this, instead of best.workout.notes, it's just going to return workout notes. So you can deconstruct into local variables, the tuples. The next thing I want to show, so come down here. Again, you can see what's happening is, I'm trying to basically cast today's workout and see if it's a bike workout, and if it's not null, then do something with it, and then see, oh, was it a distance workout? And if not, oh, it's just a workout. Otherwise, I didn't work out. What we have in C# 7.0 also is pattern matching. So pattern matching allows you to match on both the type as well as the value of an expression. So for example, here, this is telling me I can use pattern matching. And you'll notice it comes with this handy is expression. So it's basically doing all those steps for you. It's saying, basically, cast this to a bike workout. If it's not null, then give it a pattern. So this is the pattern where I said, if today's workout is a bike workout, call it bike. And then I can refer to that in scope later here. And so I can do that with all of these. So use pattern matching. use pattern matching. The other thing you can do here is you can make a switch. So I probably don't have time to do the whole switch right now, but I can just show you the beginnings of what it would look like. So if I did today's workout, then I can just, let's just move this up. So what a switch would look like is I just make it into a case. And it would look something like this. So if it's a bike workout, call it a bike, do this. And then you do case distance workout, and then your default, and do all the things from there. We also have a new syntax for when. So you could do when bike distance is greater than whatever. And so that will allow you to both check the type and the value of the expression at the same time in pattern matching. So that's pretty cool. The last thing is local functions in C#7. So local functions allow you to, basically, if you have a helper method that's only ever used by one method, rather than having it somewhere in your global namespace, you can just nest it inside like a local function. So I can just grab this. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm adding as many hashtags as possible to the end of this message. And so I'm using this try hashtag method. And so I can just move this inside, tab it over. We don't have any accessibility for local variables, so it doesn't matter. And the other thing you'll notice is now all these variables that I had passed in are in scope. And so I can just kill all of these parameters. And then I have a local function. Oh, forgot to update this one. Don't need those anymore. And so that's a local function and the value of that. Cool. OK, really quick. What's in 7.1?
You have 1 minute.
I have 1 minute. OK, cool. 7.1, woohoo. I have an app here where I'm going to send an email to Tom Brady because why not? Greatest of all time. So it's async. And so I want to send this email to Tom. So I'm just going to come in here, and I have to await it. Read it. Oh, I don't have IntelliSense. That's a bummer. So we now have, what we're working on doing is making all like language feature prototypes, like I'm showing now, into NuGet packages or extensions. So you can install them into your Visual Studio and play with the new language features that we're thinking about and give us feedback actively, like in practice. So anyways, you are whatever. And so now you'll say, oh, wait, I'm in the main method. I can't actually await anything in here, except that in C# 7.1, we now made async main. Woo! So now this will offer to make your main async, and it'll just return tasks. So basically what's happening under the hood is there's like a runner that's awaiting your task in main. And so you see that. The other thing is nullable reference types. So basically how this works is a ton of people are throwing null reference exceptions, like I did earlier, and argument null exceptions all the time. And so we're thinking, oh, hey, what if we said, use null as much as possible as long as you tell us that's what you want to do. So what that means is here I have a first, last, and middle name. And let's say like most people don't actually have a middle name, so this is just going to be null. But if we have nullable reference types, we're not going to be like, hey, you can't convert this to null because you said it would never be null. So by default, nothing would be null. But if you want this to be null, you can come in here and explicitly say, this is something that I think will be null sometimes, and I'm OK with being null. So not everyone has a middle name, and so I'll do that. This should have gone away. No. There we go. There we go. There you go. Just add to the constructor. Got to update that. And so now it's null. And then you'll notice if I keep scrolling, it's like, wait, what? This could possibly be null. And you're like, oh, shoot. So got to update that. And then it's like, oh, because you did that and you're dotting off this could have been null too. And so you're like, oh, shoot. And so this is what nullable reference types is going to do, where it's basically if you explicitly say you want it to be null, then we're going to keep warning you in all the places that it could have been null so that you have to be safe about it. So I'm going to actually have to add in here, like, if it's null, I don't know, return nothing, no middle name. That's not a thing. And so now you'll notice all my warnings have disappeared because I actually checked for null. And so that's what we're thinking in order to reduce the amount of time people spend debugging null reference exceptions and argument null exceptions. We'll just actually build this into the language. And so we'll offer all these little analyzers that let you know all the places that it could have been null because we have that kind of code flow analysis. Okay. That's all.
So we got one or two more cool things to show. So I finished that Razor app while Kasey was working. So what I basically did is I went and did a couple things. So first off, Razor Pages is MVC. So you can actually mix these in an MVC application, and to prove that, I've actually added a logger factory that's dependency injected in. I've got a logger here, and where the app saves the user, I'm not going to do any database calls. I basically logged an error out to the log system, and then I redirect to the page. And then if I run this locally, this Razor page that we just built, people that are leaving, you're going to miss something awesome. So your challenge. If I go to demo, this is the page, and it shows that that page actually does validation, and I can do things like Scott Hunter, and it's just going to say, good, I'm done. Okay, so I actually published this up to Azure also while you were doing the other demo, and I'll go to the Azure portal, and let's go find the one that's running in Azure. Let's go to the portal first. Here I am. Let's go look at my dashboard, and I've got a couple of cool things here. So here's the Ignite demo Razor. A new feature we've added, as I said before, was we want to make logging and diagnostics and stuff just work for you automatically. You shouldn't have to do anything. So I can now go to App Service, and I can search for logs here, and I can go to Diagnostic Logs, and I can just turn it on and say, yeah, error level's perfect, and save it. Now, what that means is my app will start logging automatically. I didn't have to go change any settings in my app. I didn't have to add anything to it. It'll just start logging. I can view that log both in Visual Studio, and I can view that log live in the portal here. So here it is in the portal. So it says that I'm hooked up. So let's go to my other browser, and let's go back to here it is in Azure. And I should be able to go up here and fill that form out. And when I do, let's go see if that came through. You can see that came right through. So right there, I was able to, live in the portal, turn logging on or off to different levels. I can change the level. I can go back up here and say, hey, that's not enough information. Give me everything. Make a quick change. Go back to my log. It'll reconnect in a second here. Now you see all kinds of stuff's coming through. And so we're making it easier for you to publish and debug your applications to the cloud. Now, as well as that, I can go up here. I'll hide this, and I'll go back up to the top. It used to be that if you wanted App Insights for your web applications, you'd have to go add some NuGet packages and republish, and now that's not good either. So now you just click, and I say OK, and I'm done. We just added all the App Insight NuGet packages to your running application. We set up all the configuration in the portal live for you, and it says here, you have to restart the app. I restart the app, so now I've turned on even more logging live in the portal. And I'll show you the craziest version of this that we have today. I've got one more project that I already published and already configured. Let's go back to Visual Studio. And, or let's just go to the folder here. Let's go to Source. And I've got this ASP.NET Core snapshots. And so what I've done here is I've taken an app, and logging was great. I can see those logs, very useful. But if I'm trying to debug my application, that means I'm probably going to have to add more logs to finish that. So what I've done is I've taken an ASP.NET Core project, I've added one NuGet package to it, which is what we call a snapshot logger. And what this does is it adds a profiler to your application. So every time your application has an exception, if it happens multiple times, we take a snapshot live in the portal. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to go back to the portal for this app. Let's go find it. It's an app service. Here it is, ASP.NET Core Snapshots. And I put an exception in this app on purpose. And so I'm going to go and let's go look at App Insights. It gives me a quick panel first with a couple of things about my slowest requests, but I want to go in and see the full details. And what's cool is that exception, I'm going to look at an app map. It's going to show my app. And notice there's a red bang on here. It's because there's failures here. So let's click on the app here. Here's that exception. Open the exception. Because we've taken a snapshot, first off, we give you a bunch of detail here. But we took a snapshot of the process and wrote the whole heap and everything out to a file on disk. I can view that both in the portal. Click here. This is the information you normally would get. Now I'm going to get the entire call stack. I am going to get all the variables all here right in the portal. But even better, there's this download button in Visual Studio in the portal. So let's do this. Let's close that out. I actually pre-downloaded that because it takes a while to download. How big is it? Let's look and see here. So I can press that download button. It's 60 megs. I can double click on that. Yeah. Now my Visual Studio is going to open that snapshot that was taken on my behalf in the cloud, and I can actually then open this to debug. And so now, instead of just seeing an exception in the cloud, here I am in Visual Studio with the exact line of code, with the exact exception, just like I was running it locally, with my app still running in the cloud. And so we do this in two cases. We take snapshots for errors, and we take snapshots if the performance of some method goes really slow. And you can just download those snapshots right from the portal, open them in Visual Studio, debug your applications. In a future version of Visual Studio, we're going to let you set these snapshots manually as breakpoints in your application. Anyways, we can go back to slides. We skipped a few slides. Yeah. Yep. Don't have time to do this, but I was going to show that we're now taking all the editors from Visual Studio, the exact source of those editors, and putting them in Visual Studio for Mac. The same debugger, the same project templates, the same Azure Publish. Our goal is to make ASP.NET Core and .NET Core development on Visual Studio for Mac the same as it is for Visual Studio for Windows. JavaScript and TypeScript are coming this fall or early next spring. But the hope in the future is all your .NET Core development can be done in either Visual Studio for Mac or Visual Studio for Windows, and you get the exact same experiences. Going to skip that. This is what I just demoed a second ago, the Azure Diagnostics. Pretty cool stuff. Azure Functions, we have great support for building C# serverless apps. The benefit of this is your app only runs when it's called. So this is built into Visual Studio already today. And there's actually some other talks at the event today on that as well. We'll skip that. We have a bunch of links, so if you want to find any of the stuff that Kasey and I showed you today, the deck's going to be available, and it's got links to all of the stuff on nullable reference types, all the production debugging, the portability analyzer, and .NET Standard 2. So we have 30 seconds left. Thank you guys very much for coming and hanging out with us. Feel free to come up and ask questions afterwards.